Hello and welcome to Modernizing Soft Skills Education in India to Maximize Graduate Employability, a Times Higher Education webinar in partnership with Cambridge University Press and Assessment. I'm Gitanjali Goswami and I'm Branded Content Manager for APAC at THE, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. I'm delighted to be joined by a wonderful panel of experts from academia and industry and would now like to request the panelists to introduce themselves. So please click the raise hand icon located at the bottom of your Zoom screen to respond. Okay, so I can request Shaikot to introduce himself first.
Hi, I'm Shaikot Majumdar. I'm Professor of English and Creative Writing at Ashoka University.
Thank you. And Jasmine?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Jasmine Silva and I'm an educational consultant and researcher, and I've been working recently on the employability skills framework at Cambridge and also the employability skills module, which I'll talk about in a little while.
Thank you very much. Arun, would you like to go next?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Arunachalam. I lead on the division of Cambridge for English in South Asia. So good to see you all today. Hope to share some thoughts and most importantly, hear from the co-panelists as well and some of these thoughts as well. Thank you very much.
And lastly, we have Vineet. Your mic is switched off. Your mic.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Vineet Nair, and I'm presently working as Professor of Marketing at Amrita School of Business. I'm also the Associate Director for Amrita Center for Rankings and Accreditations. So nice to connect with all of you and looking forward for this panel discussion.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to request our audience to now respond to the poll questions and have only 2 to 3 minutes to respond starting from now. So we'll wait for 3 minutes and then we'll proceed on with the webinar. Okay, so now we end of 3 minutes, and I would like to thank our audience for responding to the poll questions. And now let's see the poll results. Right, okay, so there will be the opportunity to put questions to the panel during the final 10 minutes of the hour that we have scheduled. So please feel free to write any questions in the Q&A icon located at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we will answer as many as possible before the end. Before we begin, I would like to hand over briefly to Jasmine.
Thank you, Geeta. So I'd just like to kick off the discussion today by presenting what Cambridge is doing around employability skills. And I'm just going to share my screen. So bear with me just a second while I do that. Okay, that should hopefully be coming up any second now. Are you able to see that okay, Geeta?
Yes,
Yep,
yes, we
brilliant.
can.
All right, so yes, as I said, I'd just like to start off this discussion by talking today about what Cambridge is doing around the area of soft skills education to improve employability through a skills framework that I mentioned just now, and also a digital course. So we conducted extensive research into the skills that employers want to see in their employees when they're hiring, and also as they progress through their career. And consistently throughout all the reports we were looking at, all the data we were getting from employers, soft skills were either at the top or very near the top of the kind of skills that employers say they need in their employees. And that's perhaps not surprising, because other research suggests that 85% of job success is actually down to soft skills. The unfortunate thing is that that is also the area where employers feel that their graduates are lacking the most. And this is the same across the board, really, globally, but also in India, the picture is very much the same. So when we were looking into reports from India, for example, there's a recent paper from the Centre for Policy Research in Higher Education. There's a nice quote that sums this up, that employers are reasonably satisfied with the quality of fresh graduates. So that's their academic skills and their technical skills, but actually it's the functional and personal skills that are more worrisome for them. So there's obviously a need for us to develop our graduates' employability skills while they're still in higher education. So what we did was synthesize all of this research and grouped it into 8 areas of competencies. So these are the 8 areas that employers are looking for. And we did this in order to help educators have a deeper understanding of what exactly those skills were and what they could look like in an education context. So the framework can be used as the basis of a curriculum to integrate into a program. And I noticed from the poll that I think 61% of respondents were saying that this is what they need to integrate employability skills into the curriculum. And having a framework there helps this to be really systematic and for us all to have a shared language around what those employability skills are. We also developed an employability skills module to really help teachers if they don't have time to engage with the framework themselves and design curriculum themselves from this, to help their students develop these employability skills. So that's through a digital short course called the Employability Skills Module. And that's based on these 8 areas of competency I mentioned. And I'll just go through what those 8 areas are now. So the first one is collaboration and teamwork. Then we have communication, innovation and problem solving, critical thinking and decision making, leadership and global citizenship, professional development and management, emotional intelligence, and digital literacy. So as you can see, these are very much the soft skills that students need. So we didn't focus so much on the CV writing and interview technique. That is also important, but these are the soft skills that are going to help students throughout their career. First of all, showing that they have these skills to get the job, but also then to progress within that job and to move on to further positions. So just some key features about this employability skills module, this digital course. As I mentioned, we have aligned it completely to the employability skills framework that I presented earlier. So that means that we're really making sure that we develop the skills that students need to be successful in the workplace and get their first job. The pedagogy includes interactive activities supported by video and audio. And those are really important because the video shows examples of people in work situations either being good models or bad models of the kinds of behaviours that we want to develop in our students. So that's a really powerful learning tool. We also then have reflective activities and productive activities so that students can practice what they've learned in the module. And there's also a lot of support there for teachers and learners. Then it's a flexible course. It can be used on its own as a standalone module, or it can be used and integrated alongside a general academic English course. And the module is, as I said, digital, and so it can be used on a mobile or laptop. So that means for online students or those who are doing blended learning, it's also a very nice option. It's very short, so it's approximately 8 hours of content, which means it can fit into an existing program, and that covers 1 hour per unit. And finally, students can show that they're developing these skills to employers by gaining a certificate of completion for each unit they complete, and then a digital badge when they complete all 8 units. And that badge they can then put onto their LinkedIn profile or perhaps on an email signature. So they're able to show employers that they have been developing these soft skills that they are very interested in. So if you are interested in more, we can talk about it more during the discussion, but you can also try out a sample unit on our platform on Cambridge One. And you can read a little bit more about the framework as well, some tips for teaching. There's a nice blog series as well about how to teach employability skills. And that's all on cambridge.org/employability. And I think that's it for me for now. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Jasmine, for sharing wonderful insights about the Cambridge University Press's the Employability Skills Module and Framework. Thank you very much. So the Indian higher education system is under increased scrutiny as the national education policy attempts to make both India more international and meet domestic demand for university education. Increasing student employability and optimizing English levels for work and collaboration are at the center of this, as institutions must grow and change to prepare their graduates for the fast-changing world of work. This webinar, held in partnership between Times Higher Education and Cambridge University Press and Assessment, will bring together a panel of wonderful experts to share knowledge and discuss best practice about the following related strategic challenges. So to begin, I would like to ask our panel a very first question. So the first question is that, what skills gaps in India's current higher education curricula are leaving graduate jobs unfilled? So I would like to request the panelists to raise their hand to respond. Yes, Shrekha, please go ahead.
Yeah, this is, thank you very much. I'm just going to lower my hand. Yeah, thank you. This is a very important, and this is a very, very important subject. I think it's been bothering people for a long time. I think we need to start with taking a little bit of a historical perspective. Why is it that soft skills are kind of in question? And if you look back on the Indian higher education system, it's really modeled on the colonial system, primarily the University of London system, with focus on a single subject. So the traditional focus structure of Indian higher education has been excel, kind of vertical depth, just do what single subject. And of course, this goes with a certain kind of middle class obsession with direct employability, which I think in the early decades after independence was essentially engineering education, technical education, and then developing nations needs engineers and everything was fine. But as the decades moved on, things have started to change, especially as, the early Nehruvian years, it was a very elite network. It was basically internal network, kind of um, almost an important stake. But as the things have become wider, as a wider section of people have started to coming in, as Indian middle class have started to expand, clearly they'll be run into problems. For instance, I'll compare this with the American high school model, where I think there's much less emphasis on academic focus than on kind of rounded preparation through sports or other activities. And I think this is exactly what, when I moved back from the US to India, this is what prompted me to write my book, College, Pathways of Possibilities, to kind of focus on how to widen this education system, which also got me involved with the national education policy as a consultant, and where I think we really came up with a much more multidisciplinary model, that we cannot have this single discipline focus, because you're not paying attention to anything else. The only goal is to excel in one subject. And after being employed, in a very short window of time, people find out that they can't go beyond. In any case, as we know, engineers, after a few years of employment, do not necessarily do engineering. They have to do management, they have to do administration, and these are skills that haven't been picked up. But even if you look at academic skills, I want to point out that academic skills, there are two primary group of skills which we get. One I'd call the logical mathematical skills, and the other one is language communication interpretation skills. And this really leaves out a whole group of other skills like personal skills, bodily skills, interpersonal skills, musical skills, which, for instance, thinkers like Howard Gardner or the Waldorf School, they have emphasized, which I've tried to write about which are not emphasized at all. Now, even if we leave that out, I'd say reading literacy is certainly going down. And, obviously virtual digital obsession has a problem, is part of the reason with certain classes of students. And the problem is, if you can't read language, you can't read people. If you can't read language, it's not just about making sense of text. It's also about understanding human communication. Maybe there's a slight rise in visual literacy, but, language, mathematics, code, these are all various kinds of symbolic systems. There are hidden meanings. When we say soft skills, we say things like, understand body language, understand what people are saying. When you're presenting, how are people behaving? It's not just what they actually say. I think we are really kind of going down with these skills. And this really goes back to a very single-minded, vertical, depth-driven education, which really makes us blind to everything. And I think the pandemic has really made it much worse, because for 2 years, our students, and we really see this in the students who come to a classroom, that they're completely cut off from face-to-face communication, this virtual, and there's a kind of a longer, and so in many ways, I think of course, in any case, this digital generation is a strangely unsocial generation. They probably communicate more through, sort of social media platform than in face-to-face. But I think this kind of reading human communication, human language, human, verbal discourse, non-verbal discourse, that is something we need to think a lot about. And for that, we need to have a wider conception, like for instance, if you're studying engineering, but along with that, if you study a social science, you're getting a sense of how sciences are embedded into society. And I think in the long run, I think we need to really move to a point where we need to think of education as sustainable, obviously through environment, through community. So I think we are at a very strange moment where, we are creating, even at the upper echelon, people with very deep knowledge in one field, but they're completely sort of unsustainable as individuals, so that after a few moments, they are unable to attend to things like human resource management, things like that. And I think we need to make education more multidisciplinary, multidimensional from the very beginning, and encourage interaction. So yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of things one can say, but I'll hand it over to my fellow panelists. I can see Professor Vineet is ready to talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shaikot. Vineet, please go ahead.
So I totally agree with what Professor Sagat said about a multidisciplinary approach. And I just want to focus on one particular thing, that is, when you talk about skill gaps, okay, skill gaps, when you talk about what I have experienced throughout, I mean, in my career is basically the lack of practical skills and an inadequate industry exposure among the students who are studying in universities. Though, I mean, when you talk about the new national education policy and if you read through it, the government is also concerned about this particular aspect. And they're trying to bring in a lot of, a lot of changes in the curriculum. But let me also put it one thing. I mean, when you talk about colonialism or Nehruvian approach, there's one more fact that remains, that the pace of development, okay, that has happened in India, or I mean across the globe, the pace has been faster than what academia can really catch up with. Okay, so if you look into, and I mean, there was an explosion of development when you talk about, say, moving from industry 3.0 to industry 4.0, and we talk about industry 5.0, where we're talking about artificial intelligence, Internet of Things. Now, how far the academic institutions are really geared up for this change? I mean, when you talk about higher education institutions in India, though we have a lot of universities and a lot of colleges, like how many of this, I mean, how do we sensitize our students about these particular aspects? As Professor Saket rightly said, I mean, soft skills is not about making them talk in English or talk about just, I mean, train them for GD interviews and you get them about, I mean, get them placement ready. That is not soft skills. I mean, what is the requirement of the industry? Has any, I mean, are the universities or the colleges, and talking about higher education institutions, working with the industry, trying to identify what are their requirements, and then trying to bring it in the curriculum? Now, even the national, I mean, there's a word of caution. When you talk about NEP, a lot has been said about NEP. Universities are gearing up for adoption of NEPs, and I've already started off. But what is going to happen is, when you talk about, so the universities and the colleges will start thinking broadly on NEP, but that problem will remain the same. That is what I feel that is going to come up, where there is going to be a strong disconnect with the industry. Okay, so I mean, what I'm just making a point is, like, the universities and the colleges or the higher education institutions as such will have to work together with the industry, look for, I mean, a mapping of what is the skill required and what are we trying to provide. Now, one of the statistics says that in the next 5 years, the jobs that are going to come up, 70% of the jobs are still to be, I mean, defined. Okay, so what does it mean? 70% of the jobs are still to be defined means we are all following the same old pedagogical models, the old models which are highly irrelevant for the particular time. Okay, so these are my introductory remarks. I could see Mr. Arun raising his hand, so over to Mr. Arun. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, Arun. I just had a follow-up question with Vineet. So you have mentioned very interesting points about how there's still a lack of practical skills and industry exposure. So I just want to know that what are the initiatives taken at your university to help the graduates to be equipped with these practical skills and also know what the industry demands from them?
Now, what I mean, Amrita University, I mean, as you know, is a multidisciplinary university, and we have, I mean, the focus though is on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and medicine. Okay, so here we have a very multidisciplinary approach. That is number one. Number two, I mean, we encourage our students to take up research along with our faculty members. Okay, so I mean, it will be based, I mean, they are involved in writing, not only on writing research papers, but are also involved in business research. So we could see that, I mean, the work done in this area, you could see the number of patents that come out of the university is also highlighting that, and also about the research productivity. So what, I mean, one of the encouraging steps that we are taking is, for all our, I mean, schools and centers, we are encouraging students to take up research. That's one. Second is, we have got a very good initiative called E for Life, Education for Life. Now, E for Life is basically an induction into, I mean, let us understand one thing, it's not only about the corporates. Now we need to teach our students life skills as well. So E for Life is a very good initiative wherein they work in the rural area, and that is spread across all the verticals, I mean, for all the courses. And they work in the rural India, and they come up, they identify problems, and then solutions are churned out where there is a collaboration happening between the student and the faculty. So these are some of the, I mean, the initiatives which we are trying to bring in so that there's a strong connect with the industry.
Okay. Thank you very much, Vinny. I think Arun was about to share his opinion about this. Yes, please go
Sure.
ahead.
I think completely agree with what Professor Majumdar started, and I think Professor Nair kind of reiterated that. Just taking two steps back, I think there is India and there is Bharat. I think there are these elite institutions in India where I think these skills are a given. Top institutions in India provide those abilities for those well-rounded students, the way they give the lecture, the way students need to present, the interaction, all of that. I think it's not systemic in the sense it's not in the curriculum that there's like Ashoka or Amrita would teach. By default, they kind of provide those skills. The challenge with NEP is that now you take that and offer it to say 40,000 institutions or maybe 60,000 institutions in the future. So NEP provides that systemic approach to kind of say, how can you teach? Because if you take Europe or America, you don't find skills like these that are being, because it's not like 21st century skills are emerging, life skills are emerging. These are not subjects to be taught. So the question is, who will then teach these subjects? Who will teach these soft skills? Will it be the Department of English, or will it be some other department? Will we have faculty or teaching on these skills? So there are these skills that institutions provide in their own mechanism, but there are these structural approaches that we're talking about. So today, what you're talking about is the way Professor Majumdar talked about. There is a flux. There is a rapid transformation that is happening, which means that there are many students who need to kind of be upgraded quickly. So we're looking at reaching destination point A to point B. What is the quickest way? Probably, I think we saw it on the poll. Half of the institutions already have it as a curricular approach. Some of them know. So everyone's trying their bit. The challenge right now is to kind of take, to be honest, some of them are really challenging skills to kind of acquire, because knowledge can be provided. You can watch a video, you can see how to speak or how to converse or how to handle a conflict. But unless you actually put someone to practice those skills, you kind of take that knowledge into application and then convert it into knowledge. That's what employers want. Employers want you to demonstrate those skills. They don't want you to mouth the theory of how to handle a conflict. So Professor Nai did say, what exactly do Indian employers want? In India, I think for the last 20 years, we've been working with employers. I think their needs are also changing. You ask any HR provider, they talk about the skills they want today. They're also not looking at, say, 5 years down the line. That's the workforce that is going to come out. I think someone joining college today will come out in 5 years. What are the skills that are required then? Currently, everyone's talking about AI, but I think maybe 5 years down the line, it's going to be something else. As Professor Naya said, jobs don't exist for the future skills that are demanded. So one thing I'd like to put on table is that industry and university needs to start looking a bit ahead. Yes, NEP is a good structural approach, but can we get industry to kind of say, when we are structuring courses, what do you want? And the role of university is not just to provide employment. I think one of the outcome of a university program is employment, but that's not the only thing. I think we all mentioned about the life skills. So with that, I'd like to kind of stop here. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Arun, for sharing your perspective about this, but also I just wanted to know about maybe your perspective of whether, like right now, there are certain skills that are pretty obvious that which are lacking and which needs to be instilled among students to graduate so that they can be a part of the industry. So is there a possibility of knowing what are the skills that will be in demand maybe in recent years, especially after the COVID, which has changed a lot, the industry and university? So, so please share a view of what skills might be in demand in the recent years. Is it possible to understand that?
I think I can see Jasmine raise her hand. Maybe she did the research as well. So maybe Jasmine, do you want to come in quickly? I can then add it to that as well. Thanks.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, Jasmine, please.
I actually just wanted to pick up on the point of we don't really know what kind of jobs are going to be in demand in the future. I think it's been raised a couple of times, and what kind of skills that employers are going to need in the future. They might be talking about what they need now. So when we're talking about soft skills, I think it's also important to include in that this adaptability and learning to learn, and this attitude of constantly keeping abreast of new developments. So I noticed someone has already asked a question about AI and ChatGPT, and as Arun suggested, that's what's big now, but what's going to be big in the future. So one of the key soft skills is driving your own personal development and trying to keep abreast and trying and building up that adaptability to be able to pick up new skills in the future. I think we're going to be lifelong learners, and that's going to be the way we're going to succeed in the future. So yeah, I'll pass back to Arun if he's got any specific suggestions for your other question.
No, I think agree with you, Jasmine. I think the key thing, I think there was a recent research that was shared by Google as well to kind of say that what employers look for is continuous upskilling, an ability for someone to keep learning throughout. But in India, when you reflect back, I think it's kind of when you finish your education, it's kind of a full stop. You're done with your education. Right now, you need to take up your job. Then it's employer's job to kind of provide you learn on the job. So I think the biggest shift that we would see, and maybe NEP can precipitate, but what's happening along with AI and all of that would precipitate, is the ability to kind of constantly look at learning. Lifelong learning would be a key factor. So universities like Ashoka, Amrita already looking at, say, how can you support managers, how can we support learning throughout. So I think that would be one important skill. But the difficult part is also kind of crystal gazing into the future is also, the more you look into the future, the more you want to look at, say, some of the fundamental skills. I think you cannot really be looking at betting on, yeah, maybe your meta world and your AI world, but currently what are the core ingredients that are required. In the school space, I think there was a very good document on the 21st century skills. I think higher educations can also look at borrowing some of those to kind of say, what are those skills that can be actually deployed. The challenge is some of them are quite foundational skills. A higher education institution and foundation skills, to be honest, is not a great fit, because we are looking at institutions of research. I think Professor Nayak did talk about the research that Amrita does. But in a research-oriented institution, then would you be offering a foundation learning program as well? So that's the dichotomy that we have, because our students come from various backgrounds. They are not finished product when they come from school. Actually, when they join universities, when they start realizing a lot of it. So challenges in India, higher education is actually a bit more exacerbated. You cannot compare it to the systems in UK or US, because here the students come with almost probably limited skills, and the universities are expected to provide everything for them. I can see both Professor Nair and Majumdar nodding ahead, so maybe they would have something to add to this. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So we're already talking about the industry and how it is important for us, for the universities to know what skills it's required by the industry. So I'd like to ask our next question to all the panelists, that how to build stronger links with industry to ensure that students are graduating with the right employability skills. So I think if Vineet can share more of this question, yes.
I mean, like I said, like you have to involve the industry into the curriculum. I mean, now how do we do that? I mean, so now the first approach would be to, I mean, when you're researching a program itself, when you're designing a program or curating a program, you bring in industry experts into your board, I mean, academic council. Okay, the first step is that, I mean, they are in a better position. I'm talking from industry perspective, though, as Mr. Arun said, like it's not only about giving them degrees or what you have to teach them life skills also. But I mean, I will not say that you just bring the people from the industry, because you have to bring people from diverse backgrounds. Okay, so you may have, a thinker, a social activist, probably a person from the industry. So your academic council has to be, or the governing council has to be diversified. Okay, and you have to have people from diverse backgrounds coming in, bringing in different skill set, and that brings in the change. Okay, and secondly, when you're preparing your academic calendar, I mean, you have to look into how many times, for example, like we were sitting to prepare our School of Business academic calendar this time, we were looking into how many times, I mean, School of Business has to be connected with the industry very closely. So we're just looking into how many times that intervention is going to be brought in. Okay, so I could see even a question in the chat box. It says that when I commented that we are still following the old models of pedagogy. Okay, now here, what I meant here was, I mean, there are many, I mean, majority of the schools or the colleges or the universities you look into, they follow still the lecture method, the rote learning method. Okay, so I mean, let us call spade a spade, where you are just still focusing on, I mean, the faculty dictates the lecture notes, put it on the board, or the PPT PowerPoint slides are shared. Examination is like you ask what, why, when, how type of questions, and things are done. It's not like that. I mean, when I'm talking about new models, you have to have, I mean, questions should be application based. Okay, that is where case study approach comes into picture, or you put a live problem which an industry or say an NGO is facing, give it to the students, let them, I mean, break the head on that. So those type of things have to be brought in. I mean, if we have to bring, bring a change. So for that, first is networking. I mean, you have to network with the people from the industry, bring them on board into your academic council, and frequent interactions have to be there. I mean, it's not merely doing a lip service. When you do that, I mean, for example, we say that, okay, 15 people from the corporates visited the campus. That's just a lip service. What did they do there? It was just talks, or did they engage the students into something? Did they give the life, I mean, a real life issue, and were the students working on that? Was there a design thinking model being worked on? So there are a lot of things which have to, I mean, it's a slow thing, I mean, but I mean, a steady thing which has to be brought into the curriculum.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Vineet, for sharing your perspective. Maybe I can request Shoaib to also share his perspective about this.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure. I think a lot of people are saying traditional college is under threat. I think certainly in the US, a lot of states are withdrawing support. They have a lot of problems, high tuition and everything. I think India, we are very fortunate that is not a problem because of a socialist system. Much of our higher education system is still very affordable. And we have lost our public education system, but we have to make sure that public higher education is still possible. Private universities honestly can do only a small part. But there have been all these talks of fragmenting college. When I was teaching at Stanford, for instance, the D school, the design schools came up with a model where you have 6 years of college distributed over different decades of your life. So do 2 years in your 20s, 2 years in your 30s, 2 years in your 40s, and you kind of come back. I think those are interesting models and they will continue to have a conversation with lifelong learning. But because of social responsibility, economic responsibility, even the way our body is constructed, the time between 18 and 22 still remains a very key portion. However, as I think, Mr. Arun said that, we can't certainly think that education is over. Education is only a point. We have to think of it as not a terminal point, but as kind of an ongoing. However, what kind of education, that's where I think I'll differ a little bit from what Professor Nair was saying, because as a champion of what I call liberal education, I remain that I do believe that in some ways, one thing we all agree is that things are changing. So no one really knows what the future holds. So it's very difficult to actually tailor a kind of education with a certain kind of job in mind. Our fathers, our fathers and mothers, our parents' generation spend their whole careers in one company. Now people forget about one company. People don't even have the same career. You are an engineer for 10 years. In your 30s, you become a lawyer. In your 40s, you become something else. So what is the kind of education we can give someone that can prepare them for a whole life? And especially in a very fast changing world where skills are getting, I still think, and my answer is somewhat classical and old fashioned, that a student needs to follow their passion. You need to really choose what you're really good at. But this is the important of the multidisciplinary. Also look at something that is very different. And I think when I speak at high schools and different places, I meet, kind of people who want to study medicine but love sports, people who want to, study physics but also love music. And I think we tell them, and you have to choose one thing. I think this is where I think if what I call, if you create contradisciplinary personalities, say somebody who has language facility and has also some quantitative facility, you can take the whole world. So I think we need to focus on widening their skills and choosing different disciplines. And also to remember that, one very important skill that is not necessarily taught in a classroom, but that will remain relevant in no matter whichever way the workplace changes, is that of human relationships. We must teach them how to build human relationships. And whether we are communicating through virtual mode, digital mode, it's about, and I think we are increasingly inhabiting a world where we're intolerant of each other. We're intolerant of each other on a personal basis, on a racial basis, on a gender basis, and communal basis, all kinds of divisions. But I think it's very important to understand, if you cannot work with a team, if you cannot put yourself. So those are things. And I think let's not forget, college is not just about what you learn in the classroom. That's why the residential experience, the social experience, all that is really important. And this also goes to the question of admissions, that we must widen our admission pool so that certain elite colleges, and this I've seen in Ivy League colleges in the US as well, we our education admission system is structured in such a way that only a certain kind of education beneficiaries can come in, and this needs to be widened. It's not just a question of money. You can create scholarships and encourage other people, but without having a certain kind of pedigree, a certain kind of cultural literacy, they'll not attempt. So we need to widen that. Only then, because the world is really changing, we cannot keep anything for even practical purposes. Everybody is now in the game, and we cannot continue. So human relationship building is something extremely important, but I'd still strongly advocate for college education having at least a liberal foundation. As you maybe move towards the end of your college education, you have a sense of what you're good at, but you must start with this larger foundation courses where you are exposed to the scientific, the mathematical, the literary, the philosophical, the social. You must have that wide basis. Think of how the world relates to each other. And then you have to, because as I said, a classical education will never go out of focus, because the world is completely changing and outdating our skills.
Thank you very much, Shaiko. That's very interesting how you have reiterated the fact that multidisciplinary approach is very important, even, for example, to have a stronger link in the industry, or to even equip the graduates with the relevant skills, be it in any field that they are in. But also what is important to understand is to be more inclusive and to be equitable, especially for students who are remotely, especially during the pandemic and post. A lot of students are still studying remotely, and to engage with other students effectively in person and online is very tough. So I'd like to ask this question to our panel, that what are the benefits of making higher education in India more inclusive and equitable, particularly for students who must study remotely? So maybe I would like to request maybe Vineet to again maybe share his perspective on this.
Yeah, so I mean, inclusive and equitable, because we have to make it inclusive and equitable, because if you look into the statistics, now it says that India continues to struggle with the high youth unemployment, and less than 50% of the working age Indians are in the workforce. So that's something, the statistics are a bit startling. And though, you look into the latest AISHE report, okay, and which talks about the statistics of 2020, 2021. Though we have, improved our gross enrollment ratio, the GER, okay, but at the higher education level, still a lot of work has to be done. Okay, what it means is, now after the basic elementary education, still there is a lot of, there are a lot of people, a lot of kids who drop out of school and who are not coming into the higher education space. So there is a bit of a problem when it comes to inclusivity, or when you talk about education being equitable. Okay, a lot of kids are actually moving out of the mainstream. Okay, and that is becoming a big problem for India as well. Okay, so how do we do that? Is basically when you talk about students studying remotely, the COVID was a very interesting case study. If you take it as a case study, that 2 years, it was a different normal altogether, and most of the education was online. Okay, but during that online education also, during that period also, there were a lot of people, there were a lot of kids who were not having access to digital media, or to the people are, though we talk about technology revolution, we talk about accessibility through mobile phones and all, but there were many places which were not having accessibility to, people who didn't have access to smartphones, because if you don't have access to smartphones, you cannot attend classes. Okay, and second was when you talk about the bandwidth, okay, the internet. Okay, though India, when you talk about as a country, when we are moved from 4G to 5G. Okay, and when you talk about 4G technology, there are still some places in India, remote places, where you don't have even access to 2G. Okay, so what happens is, even technology plays a very important role to bring in equitability. Okay, so that is not happening. Okay, so when you talk about there are a lot of steps being taken by the government. Okay, whether the central government or the state government, you will see that in the union budget that was presented very recently, there was a lot of allocation. There was a lot of budgetary allocation for this skilling programs. Okay, and the government has already allocated around 68,804 crores for school level education and 44,094 crores for higher education. So there's a lot of money being pumped in by the government. Okay. Now, how far it is going to bear results, I mean, time will tell.
Thank you so much, Vineet. Arun, you have raised your hand. Please go ahead.
Now, just to kind of state the real problem here, currently the enrollment ratio from school into higher education in India is under 30%. And the national education policy and the vision, they want to take it close to 50%. Some states like Tamil Nadu already have close to 50% enrollment ratio. What we're really talking about here is that India almost, you're going to double the number of candidates who are going to get into higher education in almost really a short time. Say maybe another 5 to 10 years, going to have double the number of students who are going to come in, and it might even go further. The challenge right now is, then I think it's a bit more fundamental, the role of higher education, where for some of them, maybe higher education is a skill pathway rather than a knowledge pathway. I think we need to, I think the stream will have to kind of, we have to be really clear. Employability is a challenge, universal challenge, but then even to be a professor, you need certain skills. To be a dance teacher, you need certain skills. So there are skills that are involved. Employability is not to produce graduates with English language skills that are suitable for an IT or a BPO job. So I think we draw a line over there. India needs to really look into it. So accessibility, equity, how are we even going to manage? So it's not that universities can double capacity. So digital is going to be an important way forward. But then I think post-COVID, many employers have become a bit more cautious about skills acquired during this period, because while there was a lot of knowledge, webinars like this happened every day almost, a lot of information sessions were done. Many of those graduates were not able to convert them into a real, what do you call, skills. I think they attended all of them, but as Professor Majumdar really said, I think they have certain audio visual skills. They would probably know how to attend a lecture, but how do you demonstrate skills that you learn in a lecture is not something that's been really done. So India needs to really solve this problem. Technology is going to be really important. But then most important thing, maybe I'll just highlight this issue before I pass it over to Professor Nair. There was also a question here in the Q&A. Who's going to deliver these? Do we have faculty to kind of deliver it at scale? Do we have enough teachers? And do they have enough skills to deliver what we are talking about in some of these, the new national education policy talks about ability-based program, skill-based program, and all of that. Can the faculty at the scale that we're talking about, those are different issues to be looked at, because it's not a structural issue alone. Infrastructure is not going to help. Teachers also need to support. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Arun. So I think Vineet was raising his hand. Would you like to share? Yes.
Yeah. Just to add on, I mean, what Mr. Arun was talking about, how government wants to increase the gross enrollment ratio. Okay, just a point on that. Because now you could see a lot of new skill universities being set up. I mean, exclusively, I mean, there are universities which are focusing on just on skills. Okay, so skill universities are coming up. Digital university, if you see the finance minister made a comment during the budget speech that they're going to come up with a digital university with a hub and spoke model. And I mean, even the universities which are ranked very high in the NIRF rankings, okay, they have been given that status of starting online education. So even Amrita has started. I mean, I mean, it's been a couple of years. We started Amrita ahead, the online education vertical of Amrita University. So I mean, this digital education is going to play a very important role in these enrollments. So this is what I foresee.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Oh yes, sure, please go ahead.
Just one small point I wanted, I think we didn't mention that at all throughout the discussion, is the importance of research, because I think it sounds like not immediately connected to this, but obviously the big change that Western universities did was they went from being a teaching center to also being a knowledge producing center. And that has been a very powerful means of industry, university connection, which I think still is a long way to go here. So that's a really important part. And on a pedagogical level, we've been talking about a lot of traditional rote learning methods, but what I found is, and this is something I use in my own teaching, is that if you can shift students from just an examination driven, what I call the consumption model of learning, to a production model of learning, where you can create new knowledge. Even the same thing, like in a class, instead of doing an exam, Don't give them an assignment. Ask them to come up with their own assignment. Essentially, ask them to ask a research question. Essentially, what a PhD student does. Now, what I think is really useful is, speaking pedagogically, is that if they are taking control of their own learning, now, if they take control of their own learning, if they are the ones who are setting the terms, no matter what they do in the future, they will remember this agency. They'll remember that they were in active control. And this is an experience which will remain with them all their lives, rather than always writing to an exam, which is again a British introduced model to kind of produce clerks in high number. We haven't changed that. Whereas the Humboldtian Research University, the Hopkins model in the US, they've all moved where faculty is producing research, but we are also replicating the model on a much smaller scale in the classroom, where we are asking students to do that, which is again lead to a different problem, that right after the bachelor's and master's, we ask them to produce research at the PhD level, and they've never done it in their whole life. So the PhD quality is also very poor, which in turn leads to poor teacher quality. So I think the NEP also suggests the National Research Foundation, research quality has to be. But even on a pedagogical level, it's very important to let students take control and get a sense of what knowledge production means. So rather than just consuming knowledge and kind of regurgitating it in exams, they should also get a taste of creating knowledge. And the knowledge doesn't have to be professional or anything. It's not expected to be publishable quality, but it's the experience of doing that taking control of one's own learning, that I think is really important. And I've seen this with real success in my classrooms.
Thank you so much, Shaikat. Now we have the last 10 minutes scheduled for the audience Q&A. So I can request Jasmine to just quickly share her perspective. Then we jump on.
Yeah, just a short point to say, I really like this idea of student agency and setting research questions. And it reminds me of this pedagogy of problem-based learning, where students are exploring a problem, they're actually deciding what the problem is themselves, and then using all of these 21st century skills, as well as the agency that you mentioned, to solve them. I do think it's really important that there's some support, because I think sometimes it falls down in certain contexts where there's no support for students. So they're practicing the skills as such, but they haven't had enough input to develop those skills. So I think that's where something a bit more formalized, say like using the employability skills framework or one of the modules, can really support students as they do that. So yeah, just a short point on that.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. Thank you. So now we have some of the questions posed by a wonderful audience. So this first question is to Vineet. So I think a user named Faizan has asked this question to him, that when you say that we are following all models of pedagogy, what kinds of models are you referring? Please elaborate with some specificity. Vineet, over to you.
Now here, what I refer to old pedagogical models, we have already discussed that in the panel discussion. I mean, what I was referring to is basically the rote learning part. Okay, because I mean, let us understand that, okay, knowledge, when you talk about, okay, it's not only about, it should come from lectures. Okay, when you look into the Bloom's taxonomy also. Okay, now you compare that with retention. I mean, how much the students are able to retain. Okay, now we always say that when you are delivering a lecture, okay, the retention among the participants and learning by doing, okay, when you compare, the retention is very high when it comes to learning by doing. Okay, so that is where even Professor Majumdar was talking about, or Jasmine was also talking about the same thing, in the sense like we have to give them problem-based. We give them problems, live problems into the classroom, and let them come up with solutions. So I mean, that old pedagogical models have to change. That is what I meant. Okay, rather than going for a lecture-based education, okay, where probably a professor like me would like to go and I mean show my expertise in the field, okay, and bombarding the students with my knowledge. It is not like that. Okay, we have to make, it should be a participative learning approach where the students will have to participate in our learning process, and then by that the retention happens.
Okay, thank you, Vineet. So we have a question posted by Dinesh, and this is addressed to Jasmine. And the question is more in lines of the curriculum to address soft skills at Cambridge is very much in line with what WHO has advocated as the soft skill requirement within each individual. The question for you is, what are your thoughts on incorporating learning of these skills as and when a core subject is taught to the students? Example, is it possible for a student to learn collaboration and teamwork when they are taught a core subject, such as marketing, etc.?
Yeah, it's a really nice question. I think, yes. We have at Cambridge particularly been looking at integrating it into English language teaching, but whenever we've spoken to people outside of the English language teaching discipline, they very much see how this could be integrated. You naturally, as long as you don't have a pure lecture style, I guess that's the kind of caveat, you are naturally going to be asking students to collaborate and work in teams. But similar to what I was saying just now, I think it does need that support as well. So, for example, in English language teaching, we often get students to talk together in pairs or work together in a group. And yes, that's practicing the skill, but it's not usually the case that students are improving in that skill and really that they're just kind of practicing what they already know. So I do think you can integrate it very well, but it has to have that support of a curriculum of soft skills to help students actually see their progress and develop in those areas. It can't just sort of happen naturally by itself completely, or we're not getting the most out of our students that way, at least.
Okay, thank you very much. I think there's a question by Ritesh. It's for all the panelists. So the question is there a standardized validated employability assessment test? Is there an employability development framework well researched or tried, tested and proven participative, interactive, experiential methods of facilitating to learn employability skills? So maybe I can request panelists to answer this question. Okay, Shraika, please go ahead.
I don't know. I mean, maybe I doubt if there's anything quite like that. I mean, kind of across the board. One thing I've seen that is very useful is internships and co-op programs. And for instance, being in the Delhi NCR area, we have the advantage of our students working as interns. For instance, in literature, writing and media studies, a lot of our students work as interns during the summer. And many of those internships lead into jobs. And I strongly believe that after an undergraduate degree, the first job doesn't have to be the defining one. You kind of take 1 or 2 years just to kind of make a living, be on your own, get the sense, maybe come back for grad school or whatever. But you need to, and I think several panelists have said this too, that internships are definitely going to be kind of the testing the waters. And I think many companies are also really become eager to hire interns because first of all, they're cheap, so you're essentially getting fairly skilled people at very low rate, but you are also kind of testing the future. So in a way, rather than the traditional method of exam interview right away, this is a kind of way through the gate, which I think gives a sense of employability, but maybe Jasmine can address that better with her research.
Thank you, Shraika. Jasmine, over to you.
Just to say that when it comes to an employability assessment test, a standardized one, I'm not aware of any sort of global, or one that is available. It's usually employers who decide to use particular tests, and they can be very robust and standardized. So for example, there are tests of critical thinking. There's often numeracy and literacy and those kind of tests, but they're very kind of specific skills. They don't tend to be a global employability assessment. And then, I think this is a really interesting question. What tried and tested, proven, interactive, experiential methods of facilitating learning employability skills, I think is still open. We talked about a few, I think, that have got a lot of promise, like problem-based learning. That gets that experiential element in there. And certainly, moving away potentially just from the lecture style, because that is unlikely to develop these skills.
Okay, we are nearing the last 2 minutes of the webinar, so Vineet, over to you.
So I mean, one thing which I would like to add here is we were talking about knowledge and skills, and there was a question which has come up on employability assessment test. I'm not aware of a standardized test, okay, though I consult for a lot of companies. But because the skill required for each job would be different, the role would be different depending on the job role. But more companies are now looking into the attitude part of it. That is something which we missed out. We talk about the KSA, knowledge, skill, and attitude model. Okay, wherein the attitude of a candidate becomes very, very important. Okay, and generally companies are now looking at people who are moldable. Okay, it's not like they come with a prejudiced mind and they are not able, they cannot be molded. So knowledge and skills, I mean, that you can build over a period of time, but what matters is attitude. And so that's something which I would like to bring on table, where all these three things are going to be important. That is not only skills, knowledge, and attitude. Both three of them are going to be important. Knowledge you can either, I mean, have inherited it, or I mean, you might have worked on it, but you can do a Google search also. So now people are mostly on Google search. They believe on Google, okay, or Chat GPT, or there will be some advanced tools which will be coming in, or who knows, there may be some chips which can be put on the brain and you can just download knowledge. So all these things are possible. But what about a human being who doesn't have an attitude, a positive attitude? So probably somebody with a knowledge or a skill, but with a wrong attitude will be a wrong fit. So that attitude part also becomes a very important, it plays a very important role.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And that's all we have time for, I'm afraid. I'd like to once again thank our panel for joining us, and to everyone in the audience being here. Everyone who's registered for this event will receive the full on-demand version of this webinar, which will be hosted on the THE website along with a summary article of its key findings for those of you who would like to revisit or share this content. We look forward to seeing you at future TH events. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.